The Russians have now achieved full control over the city of Pocrosk, a significant milestone in this ongoing conflict. This victory came after the capture of the last remaining defensive area to the north, known as the Donetsk sector, which had been a critical stronghold for Ukrainian forces. With this final piece secured, Russian troops have effectively sealed off the city, gaining dominance over both the eastern and western fortifications. The fighting has been intense, with Russian forces storming through heavily fortified positions and pushing into residential neighborhoods just north of the city center. This northern push is particularly important because it closes the last open pocket that Ukrainian defenders had been using to maneuver and resupply. On the southern side, Russian troops have also made steady progress, taking control of key apartment complexes and advancing along forest lines toward the railway area. This dual-front offensive is squeezing Ukrainian forces from multiple directions, forcing them into a shrinking perimeter. The capture of Pocrosk is more than just a tactical win. It's a strategic breakthrough that opens the door for further advances into the Donetsk region. But while the city itself is now under Russian control, the battle for the surrounding areas and supply routes is far from over. The next moves will be crucial in determining how this conflict unfolds in the weeks and months ahead. The capture of Pocrosk has set the stage for a critical and potentially devastating encirclement of Ukrainian forces in the nearby city of Menorat. Russian troops are now pushing aggressively into the northern residential areas, having taken control of key fortifications that once protected vital exit routes. This means the remaining Ukrainian units inside Menorat are rapidly losing their chances to withdraw safely. Reports indicate that a significant number of Ukrainian soldiers have already attempted to pull back, but many remain trapped, facing the grim reality of being surrounded on all sides. The Russians are tightening the noose, cutting off supply lines and isolating pockets of resistance, making it nearly impossible for reinforcements or supplies to reach those still holding out. This encirclement strategy is designed to force a surrender or a desperate breakout attempt, both of which could lead to heavy losses for the defenders. The pressure is mounting, and the situation inside Menorat is becoming increasingly desperate. What happens next could determine control over the entire region, as the fall of Menorat would not only solidify Russian dominance but also open new pathways for further advances. The stakes are incredibly high, and the coming days will be crucial in deciding the fate of the Ukrainian forces caught in this tightening trap. While the Russians have secured full control over the battle for dominance in the region is far from over. Intense fighting continues in the nearby city of Rodinska, where control remains fiercely contested. The northern parts of Rodinska are still held by Russian forces, but Ukrainian troops are mounting persistent counterattacks from both the northern and western directions. These counteroffensives aim to reclaim key fortifications and neighborhoods that are vital for controlling the city's strategic routes. For the Russians, maintaining control over Rodinska is essential. It would allow them to connect their forces operating in the north with those in the south, creating a continuous front line that stretches deeper into contested territory. This connection is not just about holding ground, it's about setting the stage for further offensives toward other important towns like Bitkin and Shevchenko. These towns, similar in size to Rodinska, serve as critical stepping stones for expanding Russian influence in the region. However, the Ukrainians are not willing to give up without a fight. Their resistance in Rodinska is fierce, and the city has become a focal point of back-and-forth clashes, with both sides suffering losses but refusing to yield. The outcome of this battle will have significant implications for the broader conflict, as control over Rodinska could tip the balance in this part of the front. The struggle here is a clear reminder that despite recent Russian gains, the fight for control in eastern Ukraine remains complex and fiercely contested. Beyond the urban battles, the conflict is also being shaped by control over natural barriers like forest lines and riverbanks, which have become critical tactical fronts. The Russians have been steadily advancing along these forested areas, gaining control over key positions that provide both cover and strategic advantage. These dense woodlands act as natural fortifications, making it difficult for Ukrainian forces to launch effective counterattacks or resupply their frontline units. Meanwhile, the rivers running through the regions such as the Younger and Here form natural defensive lines that the Russians are working hard to secure. Controlling these riverbanks is crucial because they protect the flanks of advancing troops and limit the enemy's ability to maneuver. By holding both the eastern and western river lines, Russian forces can operate with greater freedom, pushing deeper into contested territory while minimizing the risk of being outflanked. This control also disrupts Ukrainian supply routes and communication lines, further isolating their forces. The capture of forest patches between these rivers has allowed the Russians to create a more cohesive front, linking separate units and strengthening their hold on the region. These advances in natural terrain are not just about gaining ground, they're about shaping the battlefield in a way that favors sustained offensive operations. As the Russians clear these forest lines and secure river crossings, they set the stage for a critical push into the heart of contested areas, forcing Ukrainian defenders into increasingly vulnerable positions. The battle for control over these natural barriers is a silent but decisive factor that could determine the momentum of the conflict in the weeks to come. One of the most critical aspects shaping the ongoing conflict is the battle for control over logistics and supply routes. Highways and key roads in the region are more than just pathways. They are lifelines that determine how effectively forces can move troops, equipment, and essential supplies. The Russians have been focusing heavily on securing these vital arteries, especially the highways connecting towns like Donetsk and beyond. Controlling these routes allows them to maintain steady supply lines, ensuring that frontline units remain well-equipped and reinforced. However, Ukrainian forces are actively trying to disrupt these connections. There have been repeated attempts to cut off the highway from the northern flank, particularly near the bush camp area, aiming to choke off Russian supplies and slow their advance. This ongoing tug-of-war over supply lines is crucial because without secure logistics, any offensive risks stalling or collapsing under pressure. The Russians understand this well and are pushing hard to strengthen their hold on these routes, including efforts to connect forces operating in the north and south through safer, more secure roads. For example, the road from Tretyak offers a safer passage compared to the exposed open fields that troops currently have to cross. If the Russians manage to push through contested cities and fortifications, they could open this route fully, allowing for faster and more protected movement of forces. This would not only improve their operational capabilities but also put additional pressure on Ukrainian defenders by tightening the noose around contested areas. The battle for logistics is often overlooked, but it's a decisive factor that can tip the scales in prolonged conflicts like this one. Whoever controls the supply lines holds a significant advantage, and right now, both sides are locked in a high-stakes struggle to dominate these critical routes. Looking beyond the immediate battles, the Russian advances in Pocrosk and surrounding areas are part of a much larger, strategic plan aimed at consolidating control over the Donetsk region and pushing deeper into eastern Ukraine. The capture of key towns and fortifications isn't just about territory, it's about creating a continuous front line that allows for sustained offensive operations. Russian forces are methodically working to connect their positions from the east to the west, linking towns like Ionobilia, Beristo, and Kharkiv. This network of control would enable them to secure supply routes, reinforce their troops more efficiently, and launch coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. The forest patches and highways between these towns are crucial for this strategy, providing cover and mobility that can outmaneuver Ukrainian defenses. At the same time, the Russians are eyeing further targets beyond these immediate gains. Towns such as Sabanka, Dufabelka, and Arkishnet on the western flank are next in line, along with continued pressure on cities like Bitk and Shevchenko to the northwest. Each of these locations holds strategic value, either as logistical hubs or as gateways to even more contested regions. The goal is clear: to push the front line steadily westward and southward, gradually eroding Ukrainian control and expanding Russian influence. However, this plan depends heavily on maintaining momentum and securing supply lines, which remain contested. The coming months will be critical as both sides prepare for what could be a prolonged and intense struggle for dominance in this key part of Ukraine. The broader picture reveals a conflict that is far from static, with shifting front lines and high stakes that will shape the region's future. Amid the ongoing conflict and shifting front lines, the 28-point peace plan has sparked intense debate and controversy, especially across Europe. Critics argue that the plan appears heavily biased in favor of Russia, pointing out that it doesn't hold Russian forces fully accountable for the war, and seems to reward them by recognizing control over large parts of the Donetsk region. Many see this as an unfair concession, given the scale of destruction and loss caused by the conflict. However, when you look closer, the situation is more complex. The remaining territory in Donetsk that Russia aims to capture is roughly 5,000 square kilometers, a significant area, but one that, at the current pace of fighting, Russia could realistically take control of within a year if no peace agreement is reached. This means that, whether through negotiation or continued conflict, Russia is likely to gain this territory eventually. The peace plan, in this light, might actually serve to limit Russia's ambitions rather than expand them. It keeps the region divided, preventing Russia from pushing further into other parts of Ukraine, such as the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, which could be at risk if fighting continues into 2027. Additionally, the plan includes provisions for Ukraine to regain control over some areas previously lost, like parts of the Kherson and Prope regions, totaling around 2,000 square kilometers. When you subtract these from the total contested area, Russia's net gain under the plan would be closer to 3,000 square kilometers, which would be demilitarized. This suggests that the peace plan is not a straightforward win for Russia but rather a complex compromise that limits further escalation. The debate over the plan's fairness continues, but it's clear that the future of the region hinges not just on military advances but also on diplomatic negotiations that could reshape the conflict's trajectory. As the dust settles over Pocrosk and the battle lines shift across eastern Ukraine, it's clear that this conflict is far from over. The Russian forces' recent gains, including the full control of key cities and strategic natural barriers, have reshaped the battlefield and put immense pressure on Ukrainian defenders. Yet, despite these advances, fierce resistance continues in places like Rodinska and beyond, where Ukrainian troops are fighting desperately to hold their ground and prevent further encirclement. The struggle for control over supply routes and logistics remains a critical factor, with both sides locked in a high-stakes battle to secure the lifelines that sustain their operations. Beyond the immediate military developments, the controversial 28-point peace plan adds another layer of complexity, highlighting the difficult balance between diplomacy and warfare. While some see the plan as favoring Russia, a closer look reveals it may actually limit further Russian expansion and keep the conflict contained, at least for now. What happens next will depend on a mix of battlefield outcomes and political negotiations, both of which are unpredictable and fraught with risk. For viewers watching this unfold, it's important to remember that behind every advance and retreat are real lives and communities caught in the crossfire. The future of this region remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: the fight for control, influence, and peace is far from finished. Stay tuned, because the next chapters in this story will be just as critical and revealing as what we've seen so far. Before we wrap up, it's important to take a moment to reflect on everything we've covered. The situation in eastern Ukraine is evolving rapidly, with each new development carrying significant consequences for the region and beyond. If you've found this update insightful, make sure to stay connected because these stories are far from over. By subscribing and hitting the notification bell, you'll be among the first to get the latest news and analysis as the conflict unfolds. If you want even deeper insights, consider checking out additional content through Patreon or YouTube memberships, where exclusive updates and behind-the-scenes information are available. Your support helps keep this channel running and allows us to bring you the most accurate and timely coverage possible. And of course, don't forget to leave a like if you found this video helpful. It really makes a difference. The battle for control in Ukraine is complex and ongoing, and staying informed is key to understanding the bigger picture. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe and stay curious. We'll be back soon with more updates that matter.